I'm starting this channel, I could think of no better location than here at Mackinac in Mackinac Island. The history here spans so much time, from before the Revolution, through the Revolutionary War, the War of 1812, up through the Civil War. It really was a no-brainer to start the channel here, plus it's in my native state's home backyard. Given the rich history here, it was a good jumping off point. That being said, we are today currently at colonial Michilimackinac. Now, this was originally constructed back in 1715 by the French. They were the ones that originally built this, and this, for them, and later the British, was the hub of the fur trade. This is where everything originated. This was the biggest mecca, you might say, for the fur trade. Now, the fur trade itself was one of the biggest reasons that this country got explored, and it got a lot of the European countries very, very rich. Back in the 1700s and up until the 1830s, the fur trade was the biggest global economic boom that it had ever seen. It is what fueled everything. Now, as far as the fur trade's impact on the local animal population, well, that was absolutely devastating. Particularly for the river otter and for the beaver populations. It just wiped them out. Now, what about for the Native Americans? The Native Americans relied on the fur trade. That was what got them their main source of income. That's how they were able to get weapons, kitchenwares, European goods. Later in time, the fur trade caused a lot of tensions between Great Britain and the United States once the United States came to be. Out of this, the U.S. wanted to eliminate the fur trade from British control. Well, that led to tensions and was one of the reasons that the War of 1812 happened. One of the things that's very cool about this place is during the summertime, they actually have archaeological digs going on. Now, I'm here in early October, and they have closed for the season their dig. They closed it sometime in August, from what I'm told. But if you come in the summer, you can actually speak to the archaeologists who are digging here, and they will actually answer all your questions. Now, colonial Michilimackinac is one of, if not the oldest archaeological continuous dig in America. They started this dig here in 1958, and it is still ongoing this year and plans for next year. Given that long archaeological dig, you would think they have pretty much uncovered all they could here. Well, not really. Reason being, take a look at this. So you've probably noticed in the footage so far, you see all these buildings throughout here, and then you have this rather large blank space. Well, when the fort was in total operation, every square inch of this place was utilized. There was not a whole real lot of room between buildings. That means that in this area in here, there were more buildings. Now, we do know there was a bit of a parade ground, which would have been in this area here. But that means they still got some work to go. Now, you may be wondering what this giant mound here in front of me is. Well, this was the original powder magazine. And it was built by the French civilians here. So this is where they would have stored all the gunpowder, musket balls, all that sort of stuff. Cannon ordnance. And we're going to go down and take a look at what the inside of it looks like. So here we are in the powder magazine. And as you can tell, these timbers, which originally made up the floor and the side of the magazine, are charred. Well, why are they charred? Simple reason. When the British moved this fort to Mackinac Island, they didn't want to leave anything useful behind, especially because they moved it during the American Revolution. And they didn't know what us dang Americans were going to do. So they torched whatever they could not move themselves. Result being, all that was left was a burned out husk. Now, this area of the fort was excavated back in 1974 and 1975. And these are some of the objects those archaeologists found left behind. According to what they found, this was quite well preserved, showing both elements of the French and the British. Exhibit here. They have multiple little dioramas or mock-ups of what the fort looked like throughout the years. This one here is what the fort looked like in 1715 by the French. So this is what the original layout of the fort looked like. Pretty small compared to what came later, but this is what you would have seen if we were here back in 1715. In the 1730s until the 1744, the fort underwent a bit of a dramatic renovation. So it was expanded and more buildings were added, giving it more of the square shape as opposed to the rectangle. This was also done by the French. Between 1744 and 1761, Fort Michilimackinac underwent another renovation, but this time bracing it for war, adding more to the defenses of the fort. In 1761, the British finally took over the fort, and well, they wanted to make it more of a British fort style. So they did a multitude of renovations to the fort at the time, creating this space. It's now beginning to look a bit more like what we have represented today with the reconstruction. And lastly, here is the model of what the fort looked like originally back in 1781 during the American Revolution. This is what it would have looked like right before they moved everything to Mackinac Island and right before they destroyed what was left over that they could not move. This, for the most part, is what we're seeing today here. why did the French and the British decide to build this fort here? Well, there's a simple reason. Back in the 17 and 1800s, there were no roadways, there were no trails to speak of. Their main mode of transport was either your own 2 feet, or it was waterways, rivers, creeks, streams. Well, the best way to get around, especially up here, straight to Mackinac. If you are trying to keep something for yourself and prevent others from using it, right here, you would be able to deny your enemy, say in this case we are the French and we are trying to prevent the British from moving into our territory. Right here at the Straits, you have the ability to block your enemy from moving from one of the Great Lakes to the rest. In 1763, the local Ojibwa tribe, well, they had some gripes against the British, and they were going to make themselves known. Well, also in 1763, there was this thing called Pontiac's Uprising. It was also called Pontiac's Rebellion. They took part in it, and they took over the fort, killing 16 British soldiers and overwhelming the rest. Now, the British did eventually get the fort returned to them the next year by the Indians once the issues were resolved. Now, some of you are probably wondering, how close is this fort to the rest of Mackinac City? Or you might be able to hear some of the traffic in the background. Well, there is a good reason for that. Here is the fort, and just a little ways over yonder, there is the Mackinac Bridge. So we are dead on the bridge. In fact, the parking lot for this place is directly underneath that bridge. Now, by 1780, the British needed to find a new place to reside. They are going to move colonial Michilimackinac from here all the way to Mackinac Island. It is more strategic than what it is here, and that's where we're heading off to next.